We would do well to learn from the life and the example of the Apostle Paul when it comes to being content with how God has planned out our life. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Wednesday. Paul was one of those who had traveled much of the known world in that day, preaching the gospel to whoever would hear him. And he certainly encountered a varied response. He also worked to make tents to earn a wage to fund his missionary journeys. But in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6, verse 11, he says, "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am, therewith to be content." He has mentioned in a previous verse that he was thankful to the church at Philippi for helping care for his needs during these travels in recent months. Despite their persecution and the affliction as Christians they had received, some of them had even suffered a loss of material things in Philippi because of those who were persecuting them. Yet they continued to send gifts to the Apostle Paul. If you'll remember, upon Paul's first entry into Philippi, back in Acts chapter 16, the Bible tells us he encountered a group of ladies who were praying by the riverside, and he preached the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. One of these ladies, identified as Lydia, a seller of purple, she may have been a woman of some means to be able to help with their needs. We know that she compelled Paul and his traveling companions to stay at her house while they ministered there in Philippi, and she cared for them. Perhaps she was the one responsible for these present gifts that were coming from Philippi. But that's not really the point. What really matters in these verses and what we want to notice today is that Paul said, no matter what the hardships are that I have experienced, he says, not that I speak in respect of want. You know, we don't find Paul ever begging for things or calling for someone to supply his needs. I mean, certainly there were some long stretches of road where he did not have all the necessary travel needs. Perhaps he could have used a new pair of shoes or even lacking in food and drink. So Paul's testimony here is, I have learned in whatever state I am, therewith to be content. He goes on to describe his own experience. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound, both to be full and to suffer need or hunger. But this attitude of being content is apparently a learned trait that has come through some pretty difficult times. What would it take for us to learn to be content? Paul's final testimony in this paragraph is very famous. He says there in Philippians 4, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, this is not speaking about some supernatural ability that Paul has been given to leap tall buildings in a single bound. What Paul was actually saying in this verse is, I have been through some tough times, and I have been blessed, and I have been enabled to be content through all of those things, through personal needs, through personal wants, whatever state I'm in, I've learned I can trust in the Lord, because through Him, I can do everything.